So welcome back. And I'd like to start off by introducing our host, Yuhfen Lin from Chico State University. And I'll turn it over to her and we can start our conversation. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. So today I'm planning to discuss with you about the students' well-being and how we can modify our course and assessment in particular to fit their need and to be more caring for how the student is doing at this time. I know everyone knows that because of COVID, we have moved completely online, which is a really difficult process for our students. It put a lot of mental stress on them. I'm at Chico State. I don't know how many people you actually know where Chico is. Chico is in California. We are about 25 minutes away from Paradise. That's the town that got burned down in 2018 in November, about 2 years ago. So the entire community goes through that fire 2 years ago, and we absorbed the entire town. So basically, an extra town fit into the entire Chico. And 2 weeks ago, the Bear Fire happened. Wednesday morning, I wake up, the sky is dark orange. And everyone in the town is thinking, should I go home and pack? That's in your mind. And you have to go on and teach this class and interact with your student. It was a lot of stress for everyone, not just the student, it's also the faculty. So starting the discussion, I would like to open it up for you to talk about that. What have you found out the struggle our students are facing at this time right now? Have anyone talked to your students? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So, you know, the students that I've been working with, I think it's interesting because many of them have been academically successful in the past. And I think they are finding that they have to relearn how to do school again. You know, a lot of the skills that they developed over years of education, of how to study, how to interact, how to, you know, be a student, a lot of that's just been turned on their head. And I think that they are having trouble kind of just reformulating, like, how do I do school?
I found that a lot of it has to do with organization. They don't have the structure that they're used to in terms of someone meeting with them 2 or 3 times a week and reminding them that they have to complete things. Mostly they are on, they at least feel that they're on their own, and some of them have trouble keeping track of what's due and what's not due, and the fact that they should schedule time to do this and schedule ahead of time.
Yeah, I see Jason post that the internet connection is an issue. What I found for my student, I have student with internet connection issue, of course. And on top of that, because we're in California, there is also power shutdown, totally random, because the wind is up, so the power is off, and they don't know how long it's going to take before the power to come back.
Last spring, we ran into the same problem with the high school because I had students helping younger brothers and sisters till 3, 4 in the afternoon, and they just couldn't even start my assignment until sometime after supper. So it was having to accommodate. There's a zone here of a start time and an end time with enough space so that they could get it done. And then it was a matter of also I had to sort of cut it off. Otherwise, high school kids, it was 2 in the morning, they're working on it. And I said, no, that's too far out, you know. So it was trying to find that balance of when an assignment is started and when is it going to be due, that it's in a proper mode, and having to learn those skills on how to do time management became a real issue.
I've learned the hard way to not make anything due over the weekend, because that's when internet issues seem to come up, and that's the time where, or even their logins, if they have to change a login, they can't contact IT over the weekend. So as far as due dates, I'm avoiding the weekend. That's one thing I learned during this time.
Can I go back to pointed out? He was talking about how the students need to learn how to be learners again. And I've actually found that many of my students approached this fall with that kind of intention. Now, I don't know if it's because I pointed it out in class, but they did kind of come around, and I've noticed that the students have been a lot more open to doing things that I tell them to do, like homework and things like that. I've had more students in my office hours this semester than I have ever had in the past. And, you know, I don't know if it's that, again, the students are open to learning how to learn because all of their assumptions are now out the window. But that's actually been kind of a plus for me.
That's one of the approach I use. I try to convince the student that this class is going to teach them these learning skills that they will be able to apply to all the other classes they will be taking in the future, and have them to rethink how they learn, how they approach learning, and really go down to the point to talk to them about that learning is not just listen to a lecture, memorize with the index cards, flashcards, because that doesn't work in physics.
But you know, I always do that when we're on campus too. But for some reason this semester, they're actually listening. You know, that's a thing that's kind of interesting.
Mark, could you sort of put something together so for high school teachers that we could give this to students? You know, these are some skills. They're going to be maybe a lot more online classes, other things in the future. If you could put something together and give it to us, and
Sure.
if it comes from a couple of college professors, that is a big help, I think, too. It's not just me telling them this.
Sure. That might be an interesting opportunity for AAPT to collect some of these suggestions. And I do think, you know, one reality of all this is that the likelihood that students will take an online class again is pretty high. And that whether it's good or bad, I think we're heading in that direction. So having some skills explicitly stated might be valuable.
So I have a question for all of you, since we are all online right now. How do you run your exam? Is it any different from your previous in-person class?
Not really. It's just like 1,000 times more work. I mean, you know, their exams being posted on the course management site. They're meant to be live on Zoom, which doesn't help a whole lot, but that's the intention. They're uploading the solution for each page separately, so that makes it easier for the TAs to grade that particular page. I mean, over the summer, I failed 20% of my class for cheating, the summer class, and that's probably only half the people that were actually cheating. So I probably caught half of them. My colleague had it even worse. It was absolutely appalling. And so they're uploading the tests to various internet sites live during the exam. Doesn't matter what you do. Their roommate is next door, they're around the room in a computer you can't see. Students were Skyping with each other. I mean, every imaginable thing was happening. So it's a really bad situation. You know, and
Anyone else has different perspective with the exams?
A lot of the courses at the university I'm at have moved to more frequent lower stakes assessments. So instead of a final exam at the end of the semester, it's a weekly quiz or it's a test every 2 weeks. That keeps the pressure down, which decreases the likelihood that students are going to feel like they need to cheat, which seems to be working so far.
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, my colleague did that in the summer. It didn't help at all. They cheated on every single one. Every single one all summer long. So I know what you're saying, but it didn't help either.
Has anyone trying to do the exam a little bit different from the traditional mode?
I'm trying to do something different because I had the same problem everybody else had where the students were, you know, posting things on Shag and I was getting Shag answers. And so actually I tried something new this time. I'm using my Pivot Labs for exams. So instead of, you know, saying, oh, a ball is falling or whatever, I'm just like, okay, go to the video, pick one of the balls and tell me everything that you can tell me about that. And I was really nervous about it by giving, you know, the students open-ended questions, but it looks like they're not doing a whole lot better or worse. And I'm definitely seeing more creative answers.
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. So for me, I would like people to start thinking about it is that why are we giving exams? What's the purpose of the exam? Are we giving them the exam because we want to guard this gate to say you pass physics or you don't? Or are we going to put the focus on that how much our student is learning? So last spring when we first go online, I actually talk to the students about the exams all the time. And I have students even show me how far they would go to cheat. So they told me that one way of cheating, even if they have to use Pactula to show their face and everything, to show that they are not looking at anywhere, what they would do is they get an iPad and have someone connect to the other side and then put it, just prop it outside of the video camera viewable range, and they are able to cheat. Like if someone going to cheat, they are going to try that far to make it happen. So the way I think of it is that, can I think of a way to make the assessment, the exam, to be an opportunity to learn? Like, I don't really care when they learn it. It's the day before the exam or even during the exam. If I can make them learn during the exam, maybe I'm successful in some way. So I pretty much restructure my whole class this semester. We do a lot of active learning even before going online. So my regular class, I have a large enrollment class, almost 100 students in the classroom. I have them break out into groups of 4s, working on the whiteboard, and I have learning assistant running around. Once we move online, I put them into a little bit larger group. The group size is between 6 to 8. And I have them do cooperative work and have them using Google Doc to put down all their answers and discussions. And that way I can go back to check the history to see who typed what and who put in more work or less. But exam has always been an issue. I was not happy with how the exam is going to be. So at the end, I decided to go for a completely different type of exam. My exam question is very different from the traditional physics question already. So they are difficult and they are really testing for their understanding. And instead of giving them the exam question and have them sitting in front of computer by themselves and trying to crank out the numbers, I actually encourage them to work in group. So I put them in group, breakout room, doing the exams, but each of them have to write down their own answers. So like for my class, I have them doing it on Jamboard. Each person take one page of the Jamboard, write down their answers, and they can look at each other's answers and helping each other out, talk to each other. And I told them after they finish their exam, I'm going to go into each breakout room to talk to them, to ask them questions, follow-up questions to check their understanding. And I make sure they know that I'm going to call out names for each one of them to answer. And so you have to make sure everyone understand the material to the same level, not just one person tell everyone how to do the problem. And that seems to have worked out fairly well so far for this semester. I don't know what you all think about that.
I like that idea of questioning students on getting them to reflect perhaps on what they've learned and why they've done something, and those types of questions are really important for students to get those that self-evaluation. We've had a lot of trouble, not just with students being remote, because in Australia here we're sort of most students at the last few years of high school are still on site, but in terms of changing the way that we do assessment in physics, looking at work that students are producing outside of class time creates the same issues associated with the authenticity of their work. And, you know, we want them to be working outside and doing something more creative, but the idea of having some follow-up work in class where you can then evaluate that authenticity, either reflections or an interview or something along those lines to complement that, I think is really important. But just to the point about the why do we do assessment, I think students are really time poor, and they have to make some really harsh decisions about where to invest their efforts. And so assessment tasks become something they have to do. And so we sort of have a responsibility, I think, as teachers, to make those assessment tasks actual meaningful learning activities, because that's where they spend most of their time and effort. So rather than just being for that reporting, you know, I like that task to be authentic and meaningful.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of the exam need to be meaningful, because if the question is not meaningful, then why are we even spending time doing that?
So has anyone tried some sort of multiple choice thing with varying the parameters in the questions? I mean, I haven't, but I'm just wondering if anybody has. I don't really want to, but I'm just wondering.
See, Jennifer?
Muted, Jennifer.
Jennifer, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm wrong. The because I don't do it with multiple choice, but I have in Canvas it lets you pick like parameters, and you just say v equals this, x equals this, and then it just switches it up. Because I do a multiple choice section, and then I've got a more open-ended question, and so I've been doing that. I haven't on my multiple choice, because it's timed and they're quick, and I'm not looking for a lot of work in it. I haven't seen a lot of cheating on that part of it. And I think that's the key, is that it's having it timed. The students don't have time to upload things to check. But I also can't ask questions where I really need to see and show their work. So it's a balance.
I do want to point out the issue with timed exam. Do people find that timed exam become kind of issue for some of the students? Because I have students, they have a challenging work schedule or having kids they have to care for.
I didn't have that issue over the summer. I mean, and the summer exams were 2 hours long, so that made it much worse from a cheating standpoint. They had less more time to upload stuff, but I didn't have a problem with 2-hour exams in the summer.
Mark, was there a student on one of these coffee hours, I don't know, a month or so ago, was talking about that issue of open book versus timed exam, and that they sort of, for students with different strengths, depending on which one you chose to do, created an advantage or disadvantage. And for a student who had all of the content knowledge pretty well under their belt, that having an open book, you know, didn't provide them any additional benefit, and they would have preferred to have a greater amount of time rather than, and then I'm not sure what the rest of that discussion was from the student, but it was interesting that different students are affected differently, and it's important to recognize that when making that choice about a timed exam.
Yes, we had the student panel, I think you're referencing, from a month or two ago, and that was a big point that they made, which was some of them, yeah, as you said, they were comfortable with the longer form test, and that they knew what they were doing, and it was fine. But I think there's this year I've noticed sometimes with my own students that it's not so much that they have distractions of work or things, but just other people around them, their siblings, their roommates, their cat. That's posing. There you go. Alexis has her cat. That the cat can be the biggest problem in this whole process.
I think maybe they said that there was that the teacher imposed a stricter time limit on the work because they say, oh, well, you've got your book in front of you.
Sure.
So now we want to try and make sure that you can't use Chegg, or we want to make sure that there's something else. So we're going to then really narrow that time frame. And that student who really knew their stuff is put off by that. That they're like, I'm not cheating. I really wanted to show you what I know. Yep. So it's a tough gig.
Yeah, I think the kind of mindset we as teachers have is also very important. Are we putting our exam out as the way that I'm under high security trying to avoid anyone from cheating? Or are we focusing on making sure that we able to pick up the signal, which student understand the material, which one doesn't, and help out those who doesn't fully understand the material?
Yeah, I wonder whether the online format's also promoting a lot more sort of plug and chug style questions, or whether it is that people are moving to those more open-ended questions to get that insight into what students are thinking, or what their challenges are.
Well, but definitely if you want to give students the kind of challenging thinking question, the time limit need to go away, because time limit is like the worst enemy to anything creative. And for me, myself, I have been using the exam question that we have been collecting and creating for the past 20 years. So the question I'm using is nothing looks like the textbook question anymore. And for that type of exam question, there is no way I can impose a time limit, because posing a time limit means that I'm going to benefit those who cheat instead of those who don't cheat.
I wonder if there is a possibility of the other way, where I've had students complain in the past where I've said, great, it's open, and you can go, as deep as you like here. And they then turn around at the end and go, well, when you marked it, I've done this amazing thing, but I'm looking at it going, I feel a bit cheated because I could have just done this other simple thing, and you would have given me the same marks. And that, even though I'd then say, well, hey, look what you learned, you're amazing, great job. How do we value that, and we ensure that they don't go too far, because they it's a challenge as well.
So one thing that we're trying this year in my class that I'm teaching is we divided the kind of assessments up into really what we think are the core skills. Like, what do we want to make sure a student leaves our physics class saying, like, they know physics because they can do these things. And we took that bit and then we turned that into essentially a WebAssign problem set. But then we said, okay, you can do this with infinite tries. The point is to prove to yourself and to us that given an infinite amount of time, or at least weeks of time, that you can do these kind of fundamental things. And then, although we haven't done it yet, our first assessment, that's going to be a test assessment, we're really going to try to focus on the creative side and just kind of the synthesis of these fundamental things together, and try to remove the necessity of kind of testing the nuance of, can you do something, a specific skill? And we're actually weighting it so that the problem set they're doing ahead of time is what, 70% of their test grade. You know, we're kind of basically, we're guaranteeing that the minimum score a kid can get is a 70.
Yeah, I like that idea. If you go, hey, here's the core business that you're doing, we're going to make it accessible and go forth and do it. And all I'm happy, it's not about discriminating between students, which we're required to do to some degree.
Sure.
But it is about saying, hey, cool, you've completed it and you've done it, and then you can have, what's that other 30% going to be to be more discriminatory?
That the 30% then is the more traditional test that we're going to give synchronously, you know, during our class time, that will be the synthesis side of things. And admittedly, we haven't tried it yet, so we have no idea if this is a good plan or not. Like, this could blow up in our face. But
there's always next year.
And there's always next year, right? But this is at least our philosophy, is that we wanted to kind of really carve out the creative side and give people the opportunity to be creative, and then also the kind of fundamental skill side, and say, like, look, just take as much time, prove to yourself that you can do the fundamental skills, and then we'll save the other creative thing for another time.
Is completing the first 70% component, is that going to, by doing that, does that prepare them to do well in the next part? Is that the idea?
That's the hope, yeah. We're also, to answer to your other question about, you know, making it open-ended and asking kids to go really far, in getting too far. And I see Joseph put this in the chat too, which is, we're also really working on trying to find really clear rubrics on what does it mean to solve a physics problem, and, you know, what are the components, what are the things we're looking for, and really try to articulate that well to students, so that they know the boundaries, but also know, like, if you take it beyond this, that's awesome, but, like, this is actually what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that rubric is good, and we have challenges with a balance between, like, a really analytical rubric, which sort of, you know, a lot of schools have issues with parents and the students, tutors, and things really going at them, like they've got it down to a fine art about how to appeal for extra marks. And in response, they've created rubrics which say, you know, I really hate this, but they say, like, has 3 headings, you know, discusses 4 points, you know, super easy to go, no, you only had 3 points. And it's the opponent of depth and authenticity. Yeah. But they sort of, once you write it down, you know, how do you then create consistent and defendable teacher judgment to support that type of assessment is a challenge that we're not ready for at the moment. We're really struggling with.
Yeah, I did a rubric for this exam that I'm grading right now, and I gave the students options, like they had to come up with their own problem, and it was, you know, projectiles, and I told them if they started from, you know, completely horizontal, they could get some points, but they could get more points if it went up and came back, and they could get even more points if they changed. And it's interesting because not everybody chose to do the hardest problem. And that was, you know, so they picked which, you know, problem that they wanted to do. And I did this with a lot of the problems where they could get more points for doing more complex things. And some of the students just were happy to understand it at the level that they understood it at, which I thought was kind of mature of them.
Well, there seems to be some discussion about rubric on the chat. I've been following that. I just want to share the kind of rubric I use for my class. So for standard problem solving question, including the exam questions and some of the homework question, I have this really simple 3-item rubric The first one called clarity. I require them to explain in word what they are doing and the reason behind it. And the requirement for that is they need to write it down in detail enough that someone doesn't know how to do the problem can follow. So when the student asks me how much they need to write, I will say, do you have a younger sibling? Or if you give this exam or homework question to your mom, would your mom be able to follow and understand? They think that's kind of funny. So first one is clarity. And one of the advantage for this clarity is that when they write it to that level, they cannot cheat. Because if they copy someone else, you can always catch it. And if they don't fully understand, they cannot fake their way through the explanation. They can fake by copying the equation. They cannot fake the reasoning. And the second one is called consistency. So in physics, that's really relevant. Their equation, their diagram, their force diagram, position versus time, velocity versus time graph, and their equations and calculation and their word, everything has to be consistent. Over the years, I've found that if the student pay attention to consistent, they generally will catch their own mistake before I even grade it. So a lot of time I see the students starting to look for consistency in their question answer and found that whether they actually make a mistake somewhere or not. And the last one, I asked them to evaluate their answer. Is there any way you can check your answer to see that if you have the correct answer? They hate it, but this is something I've been trying to push. It's really difficult to get a student to understand how to do the evaluation part. Even the physicists in our profession, we do it regularly. And I don't know if anyone do anything similar to that or have any comment about that. Gary?
One of the things I have them do is I have them write down what was your original thinking and then try to explain how your thinking has changed. Because many times they look at that problem and they go back to the old methods, you know, and it's just, you know, Galilean, before Galilean thinking, Aristotelian thinking, you know, so have them write it down. Like you said, it's really difficult to do. What was my original thinking? Have I changed my thinking in the course of doing this problem? And after a while, they get good at it, but you got to have a lot of patience to get to that point and a lot of examples.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea of the, you know, that sort of the wraparound for completing, you know, what would otherwise be a plug and chug type exercise, to turn it on its head, that the purpose of doing this is not for the answer. The purpose of doing this is to be able to it has that sort of that exposition sort of, you know, that you're explaining, you're making an argument using your calculation and you're demonstrating how to do it or something like that is more meaningful than just, hey, answer all these questions and tell me what the wavelength is. I like that. That's good.
Anyone else?
Just to point out, Danny put a great link in the chat about from a previous talk and a person sharing their resources for how to make rubrics. So I as a related topic to assessments is, you know, when during normal times, there's enough of kind of assessment anxiety that occurs with tests. And I'm curious, have people seen the same, different, less amount of anxiety or different types of anxiety in students as they prepare for assessments? And how have we met that anxiety?
I haven't noticed the difference. Just to,
Yeah,
but,
fine.
you know,
I was curious. I mean,
I mean, I agree there could be, but I haven't noticed anything.
yeah.
Well, what I have noticed, because this semester I've been switching my exam completely to open group exam and followed by the oral exam by me, each group. One day I just popped into a breakout room, students didn't know I was there, and they were having a conversation. And they were talking to each other that how much easier this class is, that they don't need to stress out about the exam. As long as they can talk to each other and learn it during the time of the exam, that's okay. And even if they fail the exam, they can still redo it. And when they found out that I was there, they was telling me how much they appreciate that.
Well, isn't that a lot just like, you know, research and industry and stuff? You're always working with someone anyway. Nobody always has the exact answer at the beginning. It's that collaborative process or thinking your way through it. So in the end, that might be a good idea, just to take some of the pressure off, work together, try to figure it out.
I couldn't agree with you more, Gary.
Some of the students that I've been talking to here at the school where I teach, we're still partially in person and partially hybrid and partially online, depending on each individual professor. And the students who have asynchronous online only courses with traditional type exams seem to have the highest anxiety about that, because they have the highest, they need the most discipline to keep up with the videos or the asynchronous content. And then they find accessibility to the professor sometimes difficult. Whereas in person, even though it might be the exact same class, something like general physics, the fact that they have accessibility to a professor in person, can talk to their classmates instead of just having faceless names who they may or may not know, depending on their major. So that's the kind of anxiety that I have seen in students here.
Yeah, I will agree with Michael, and I actually talked to my student. That's their general consensus also. And one of the nice comments I got from them is they say that at least you are still teaching us, because they feel like in some of the asynchronous class there is a video available, but they never really see the teacher and never get the so-called interactions. So one last thing I want to bring up is that, so for my class, I also do a lot of activities and things that's not related to physics to take care of my students' well-being. One thing I did last spring was I have the student write this weekly journal. So one of the journal, I know the student was all anxious because they don't get to go out, they don't get to see their friends and families, they are stressed about it. So I asked them to do something nice for themselves. So self-care as one. Second, they have to do something nice for someone who is close to them. Could be a family member or a roommate. And then the third one, do something for the greater good, to the community. And I have so many students told me that they love that assignment. That was the first time they were forced to think about things other than the school and to actually self-care for themselves, and then make this other Google Doc for them to share the ideas. So even if they have no idea, they can look at other people's idea and try it out. And I get the student to start sharing things like which yoga website you can learn to do yoga online, and how do you meditate, So it was a really good intervention in some way. I wonder if anyone else have similar ideas or other ideas they do.
It's not an assignment, but every Friday at the start of my classes, I've started doing a 30-second mental health check with my students, not inviting any kind of external sharing, but just giving them a little bit of space to think about things that have challenged them over that week, things that they maybe need to handle better this coming week, and also provided them with some resources on our learning management system. Stuff specific to our school, as well as some general resources. And students seem to appreciate at least the attentiveness to that.
That's great ideas.
We just got the results of the university's survey of students asking about all the issues they have right now. And I mean, if I can share a screen, I can show you some of their comments, or I can just read some of them. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, here. Now I enabled screen sharing, so go for it.
Is that big enough for everybody to read?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the first one is interesting, actually. Little consistency in how instructors set up the classes. So I mean, we use D2L here, but people put stuff up in very different ways. I mean, I've always had my own personal way of doing things, but I know some other faculty they just keep throwing stuff in there, and it's not really organized, and they expect students to follow it. And now I think these people are getting every instructor doing something different, and they can't find anything. And instructors unable to use Zoom. One of the ones lower says, my instructors had all summer long to get used to Zoom and they still can't figure it out, which I unfortunately believe, right?
That's an interesting one with the people trying to replicate the face-to-face structure. That was one of those things from the student forum that I was like, that the student described it as the uncanny valley, that when you try and make it as like a normal
right
classroom, it just didn't work. The differences became so obvious.
I mean, this one here obviously worries me. This feels super manufactured. Breakout rooms is the least favorite part of classes. Feels like responding to a discussion board post, but on Zoom. And I'm obviously trying to use breakout rooms during my so-called normal lectures. And admittedly, I'm not very happy with them at this point. I mean, I keep having to tell people, why do like half of you in this room not have your microphone on? Why in the 3 minutes I was observing your room, I've only heard 2 of you say anything? It's definitely much, much harder to get all of them collectively to say something. Some of them are just hiding, basically. You can't even be really sure they're even there, right? They're logged on, but you don't know what they're actually doing. And so it doesn't seem great, certainly. But there are a lot of people confused about the technology. I've had a lot more emails with really strange questions about how classes run than I've ever had before. I mean, I've had 5 different people say to me, your Zoom link for class isn't working. And, I have advisor access, so I look up the student and I'm like, that's because you're trying to use my physics Zoom link to go to your psychology class or your physiology class. I had 5 different people email me questions like that. And there have been an enormous number of sort of strange questions. And I don't know, I guess I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but these were some summaries university made of things. Instructors seem distant or absent. And unfortunately, that's not talking about any of us, obviously, right? But it's talking about some of our colleagues who are not probably putting as much time into this as they really need to. And so are you guys using discussion boards?
Mm-hmm. I am.
Through which platform?
My student volunteered to create a Discord channel for my class. So I have the student managing it. I was like, I'm going to do a handoff. I don't even know how to use it. You guys create it and I will join and answer questions.
I mean, somebody asked me about it during the summer, but then something didn't work. I don't remember what it was, but it didn't work and nobody on campus could help me with it. And then nobody said anything this fall, so I'm not using one, but maybe it'd be helpful. I'm not really sure, I guess. I haven't tried it though. Right. But yeah, this thing here.
Our the school I'm at was nervous about using Slack for privacy purposes, not privacy between students, but rather like corporate privacy, that they were stealing student information, which I find interesting. But our response to that was we found a Slack copy that's called Matterless. And it effectively allows you to run your own Slack server on your own server inside of which you completely control. So that was apparently okay for our institution.
So is that integrated into your other course management site, or is it separate?
It's separate, but you might be able to integrate it. They have a lot of integrations and things. It really is just Slack, except the only difference is that you run it on your own server.
Okay. One of the other complaints in this long document here was that students were being asked to use like 6 different platforms.
Yeah.
Some of them really didn't connect to each other, and they were just getting confused about too many different things they were supposed to use for class. But, and I understand that. I mean, so I can stop sharing if. Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I try at the beginning of this semester. I try to introduce one technology each day instead of introducing all 6 things in one go. So they can learn one thing and get familiar with before we move on to the next one. Eventually, my students suggest to use Discord because we have a Zoom breakdown the first week. So we will worry that we can't even run the class on Zoom. And Discord does has the advantage that you can do video conference and voice conference. And my student has been using it to ask questions, and I'm actually prefer that for office hour than Zoom, because normally if I do Zoom office hour, I'll be the only one sitting here waiting for nobody. But when they are on Discord doing their problem, they see me online, they will just call me right away. So it's kind of handy that way.
Speaking of office hours, I've stumbled completely accidentally on a tool that my students seem to like, which is, I have set office hours, right, like everyone, but instead of having just an open Zoom link, I decided to link it to a program called Calendly, which is hard to say, and I'm not sure I'm saying it right. But effectively, it's a scheduling program that sets up a website that links to my calendar. So I can set it for my office hours. So students go to that and they can choose which time they want to come in. And then they're automatically assigned a Zoom link for that time period. And what's interesting about it is that you can also invite other people to come. So students don't have to show up by themselves. And I think it's getting people over that kind of initial scary hump of walking into my office by yourself. So you can set it up as a time and then invite other people to come with you. And what's nice is that it's linked to my calendar. So they can actually see the times that I'm available. So they don't pick things that I can't do. And for some reason that seems to be working. I don't know why. It seems like it's an extra hurdle than just like showing up. But I think the structure of it and the guaranteeing that they don't stumble into a room with their peers that they might be embarrassed by might make that more accessible.
Mm-hmm. So we are approaching the hour, and I'm wondering, do anyone feel like they have something they can take away and do something different with their class, and they are interested in applying the new things on their class?
Well, the rubrics that Danny shared from Reagan, I think I'd forgotten about those, and I'm glad you brought those back. And it's definitely something that I need to look at, is really how I design rubrics that are helpful to students, rather than just kind of listing all the ways they can lose points. Chris is putting some things in the chat too, which.
Chris say that I think the assessment alternatives, rubrics, weight, assessment models, etc., will be useful. I totally agree. Does today's conversation make you have a new way to think of your teaching and assessment?
You know, we've had a lot of conversations on here about assessment, and you know, the two big ones are assessment and labs, right? That's what we go back and forth on. You know, I think I've come around a lot in my view of assessment, and really what value an assessment can bring to students, and really the opportunity of them growing from the experience, rather than seeing it as a negative process. And you know, I think that's been an evolution over the time that we've been doing these talks, and it's been one that I think has been really helpful to me.
Some of my colleagues have asked about grade inflation with the alternate class formats, right? Especially in this environment. We understand cheating. We want to be accommodating for students. We want them to learn the content and focus on the learning. But if we switch up everything we're doing, how do you make the grading rubric such that the grades stay normed properly? Right? In my sense, if everybody in my class got A's on everything I did, then they should rightfully earn an A in the class. But if I have every student earning an A, I'm going to be accused of grade inflation. Anyway,
Does anyone have an answer for that?
Yeah. Oh, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm actually grading something right now, and I was worried about that same issue, that if I told the students, you know, and I have an open-ended question, and I told them exactly what I wanted, that everybody would get an A. But I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing that the A students are still the A students, and my students that struggle are still struggling. I think having it open-ended, having it on time, hasn't really changed that. So far, you know, I'm seeing that it's giving them the opportunity to show me what they know, but I'm not seeing perfect scores on everything.
Anyone else has comments on that?
I guess during the summer, I honestly don't really know how well that did, because there were so many people cheating that their grades don't really mean a whole lot. And, you know, there were some, you know, I had 2 groups of students this summer. I mean, there were like 65 people, and on average, I had 8 students come to office hours every day, which is a lot. And there were those people and there were the cheaters. And there was almost no overlap between the groups because I have the participant list from every office hour. There was only one student who was an overlapping student there. And so, you know, it's really hard to judge overall because I don't know what those people would have done if they hadn't been cheating. And so.
So I'll tell you my approach. I know for all of you here teaching physics, you all have a problem bank of the question that you never be able to put it on the exam because it's too difficult for the student to do. Right? Do you all have that problem bank of the questions? You love those questions, but it's just too challenging for the student to give it to them during the time exam. So I have a good collection of those. And now since I'm doing my exam as a group discussion plus the oral exam, I'm able to pull out those interesting questions for the student to do. So essentially, I'm not lowering my standard. I'm actually pulling my standard up. And not everyone will be able to reach to the standard I'm setting for them and get 100% on everything. So I'm just allowing students to do more challenging questions and actually show me how much they can achieve. And of course, if everyone is able to achieve to that high standard, I'm more than happy to give everyone A. But I can tell you, if my student all get an A, it's not because I lowered the standard, but because they achieve more.
You know, I think this question is interesting. I also think that as we near the end of the semester, it'll become more relevant, right? Right now it's early, and you know, I think it is absolutely I hear you and I feel what your concerns are, and I think they are very valid and real things to talk about. But I bet they're not being talked about yet because it's still early. Well, early kind of, but right? Are people approaching kind of the middle of the semester yet? Maybe not. Yeah, depends on when you started.
We are just at the first 1/3 of the class.
Yeah.
Next week will be halfway for us.
Yeah.
Okay. So how's your assessment going so far since you're halfway, Michael?
I've only given one exam in each course, and they've both been in person, so I haven't had to adjust too much, except for 2 people that were in quarantine that had to take it remote. And I did what I didn't really want to do. I had them take it with the rest of the course, the rest of the class synchronously with their camera on. And there was definitely no cheating. None. Yeah, since those are all graded and returned, I see the result. And what I've, interestingly, in a general physics level class, I've discovered that my distribution is more bimodal than it ever was. So I've literally have half the class got A's, half the class failed or got D, and maybe 5 out of 24 in between that. So I'm a little baffled at the moment.
I think we're going to have to see how this all plays out this semester, right? I mean, it is the end of spring semester kind of crashed out of it just kind of ended, right? And you know, this first fall semester, I mean, yes, people were in the summer. Drew, I know you taught in the summer, and that in and of itself was probably a new experience. But no, this will be kind of the first, in some sense, full semester of what online teaching is, or even hybrid, or however you're teaching. It's the new reality, and I think we may just have to wait and see how this all falls out.
Yep, I agree. Even though we're in person, the reality is completely different here. So it's not as straightforward as you would hope.
Well, we've come to the end of our hour again, and I appreciate everyone coming, and it's great to see so many faces. And I really feel like I've gotten to know all of you over the months, and it's nice. And yet again, we still have new people every time, so it's always wonderful to continue to have new people. And I hope those of you that keep coming, by the way, I hope you you share this opportunity with your coworkers and your peers, and invite them to come along as well, because it's a valuable thing, I think, based on the fact you keep coming back. So, and you definitely don't come for my jokes. So I wish everyone a wonderful evening. Let's please say thank you again to our host, Yuhfen. She was wonderful, and good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mark.